Welcome to Where I'm From, the podcast that proves that no matter how far you go, you'll always keep a little piece of home with you. I'm Bill Meeks. As we welcome 2023 and a brand new season of Where I'm From, I'm offering up some of my favorite moments from Season 1, gratis. Stay tuned for some delicious free samples from our first season, including Stephen Tobolowsky, Kelly Vrooman, Paul Zaloom, Brian Brushwood, Ashley Verma, Jason Inmon, and more. It's the Where I'm From Season 1 Sampler Platter, and you can totally take more than one. It's okay, baby. Hey folks, this is Bill Meeks, and it's a new year, which means I have a whole new season of Where I'm From coming your way starting next week. Before we do that, though, I thought it was worth going over all of the episodes of Season 1 and pulling out the best, most funny, most awesome clips from everybody's episodes. And then basically what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take those clips, I'm going to mix them up, and then I'm going to offer them up to you kind of like the sampler lady at Costco, as you see in the title image for this episode. Now, if you're watching live on YouTube, I'll be sharing some commentary in the chat room as we go through and watch these clips. And I'll be back in between every clip for some added context, maybe a couple behind the scenes stories, stuff like that, just to, make this more than just a clip show. But it is a clip show. All right. Well, I think that about does it for intro. So why don't we go ahead and get started? First off, is going to be the pilot, a clip from the pilot episode of Where I'm From. Now, if you weren't aware, this podcast started as an entry in a reality competition called America's Next Top Podcaster that I produced with the help of my partner, September McGrady, who I hope to have on the show soon. Basically, we were tasked with interviewing a celebrity, which was Spagnola, who's a musician and YouTube artist out here in Los Angeles, who I actually had known beforehand. And I had talked to her about all of her creative stuff a lot when she was on my old show, I Made This. So when it came time to interview Allie, I was like, well, we got to find a new angle because I already spent an hour and a half talking to her about her creative life. So we batted some ideas around and I came up with the idea, why don't we talk to her about where she's from? Because I lived in Pittsburgh for a while. I spent a lot of my life right outside of Pittsburgh in Wheeling, West Virginia. So I can probably find a lot of Pittsburghy kind of stuff to talk to Allie about, right? So that was the idea. And we produced the episode pilot, a 10-minute episode, and it won the week, which was awesome. And so when it came time to develop a new podcast for my sponsor, Strean Studio, go to billmeeks.com/whereimfrom and click on the banner to check out Strean Studio. I sent them 3 or 4 podcasts that I had produced for America's Next Top Podcaster that I thought, hey, maybe they'll like one of these. And they really liked Where I'm From. And here we are, one season later, talking about the pilot still, but this is going to be the last time I talk about it. It's a really fun little clip, though, that I pulled here. So it basically, there's a lot of stuff that's very local to Pittsburgh, stuff like Kennywood and Edgar Snyder. And we kind of dig into it here in this first clip from the pilot. So I'll go ahead and play that for you now. Back to Pittsburgh, there are a few bigger names in the Pittsburgh scene. I was wondering if you've ever had any encounters with a famous Yenzer.
Famous Yenzer? Oh, man, like Donnie Iris?
Yeah, or B.E. Taylor.
Oh, wait, yes. Oh, my goodness. I was eating at Pie in Squirrel Hill. Jeez, I sound like such a Yenzer. I don't even know if Pie exists anymore. It was a pizza restaurant. I don't even know if Squirrel Hill exists anymore. Anyway, right across from me in the booth was attorney Edgar Snyder.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness. And this means nothing to most people.
I instantly keyed in.
All my friends at home would be on the edge of their seat about this story. He is a infamous lawyer in Pittsburgh, only because he runs a bunch of ads.
I really love dogs, but not when they injure someone. I'm attorney Edgar Snyder.
Yeah, he's like the Better Call Saul of Pittsburgh.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you got it. And he's so his face is in every ad, so you know what he looks like. But to see him in person, I was just starstruck. And he always says at the end of his commercials, "There's no fee unless we get money for you."
Yes, I remember that. One of the things I loved most about Pittsburgh is very celebrated amusement park Kennywood.
I have so much love for Kennywood.
All aboard for Kennywood. You just have to see it or ride it to believe that there can be
I used to work there.
Oh,
I don't
really?
know if this information is anywhere publicly. Yeah, I used to paint faces at Kennywood, and it was so fun. It was so elaborate. I would turn people into dragons and cyborgs.
All aboard, let's go to Kennywood.
Got to love Kennywood Park. I have so many fond memories of that place. And I also got to take my kids there a few years ago when we were up north visiting some family. And, it's changed, but it's still a great park. And they still have some of the old coasters like the Jackrabbit and the Racer that just kind of like, they really beat you up. And, the older I get, the more it feels like, they're beating me up. All right. So let's see here. Let me check one thing. Cool. All right. So, next up is one of my favorite interviews I did the entire season, which is a comedian, actress, performer, YouTube sensation, also former child show host, Kelly Vrooman. Now, I met Kelly through another Kelly we'll hear from in a little bit, Kelly Rands from the Humor Mill Orlando, where I was a cast member for their 2020-2021 season. It was a weird season because, pandemic, but it was a lot of fun being on that sketch team. I got to meet Kelly Vrooman through there, and she ended up being a great guest. There were so many fun moments from this episode. I had to really dig and kind of narrow it down to find one, but I think I did. And this clip, I'm going to give you no other preamble for it, but this is Kelly Vrooman in the Applebee's Vortex.
Okay, so modern Mansfield, downtown Mansfield, has had a beautiful revitalization happen. Like, there is this really cool wine shop where you go downstairs and you actually are drinking wine among the wine barrels in this wine cellar. It's rad. And then there's the downtown main block has this beautiful white gazebo, and they've really made it this beautiful garden area. They've done a lot of cool things that I think are oh my gosh, a Hallmark movie needs to film in downtown Mansfield. It's really idyllic right now. But then Ontario, which is now where I'm from. Who am I?
Hold on, let me cross out Mansfield and put Ontario.
Ontario, Ohio. That's where the mall was, and then it built out to be that's where the Walmart came, and the Target and the Meijer and the Sam's Club all came to Ontario, and so that then became where all the restaurants and the Applebee's and when I got married, my husband and I got married in the middle of the woods in Asheville, South Carolina, with just our parents who had never met before and our siblings and their spouses. No nieces, nephews, there were a couple aunts that we would have liked to have been there. It was just so super, super small and super immediate. But we then did a local Mansfield, Ohio wedding for all of the people. My husband grew up in Indiana. He's from Oregon, but grew up in Indiana. And we did a local thing there. And afterward, we were what's open? We need an after hang. Where do we go? Guess where we went? I'm going to give you 3 guesses.
3 guesses.
3 guesses. Where did we go for a late night hang in a small town?
I would assume the local bar.
Okay. Be more specific.
The local sports bar.
Think chain restaurant.
What are the ones that are in Ohio?
Think chain restaurant that is everywhere.
At Applebee's?
Yes!
I got it.
You got it on the third guess. Freaking Applebee's is where we had our after party. And I will tell you, my friends that came from out of town, that came from Philadelphia or LA, were digging the jam of the Ontario, Ohio Applebee's. I mean, there's something about it that you were just I cannot believe I am in absolute formal attire, chilling at 1 a.m., shoving apps in my face, drinking giant 28-ounce tubs of margarita and just loving my life. And we just took over. I mean, everybody was like loving it. Some game from who knows what year is on all the screens. Gosh, it was awesome.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of the interesting thing about Applebee's is when someone suggests Applebee's, you're like, Applebee's, okay. But once you're there and you've had a couple drinks in you, it's like, okay, this is my Applebee's. This is my place.
You own it. It is your place. It is truly the Cheers. It is the universal Cheers of it. I think Midwest America, definitely of Ohio, any city in Ohio.
Drinks are priced to overindulge, definitely.
Absolutely, they are. They are there to serve the college student, the sports lover, the recent divorcee. I mean, they are. Applebee's is there for you.
Yeah. They give you enough well drinks that the appetizers seem really, really tasty, and then it's just like that's how they make their money.
Yeah, but if you honestly, I would beg to differ that the appetizers are really tasty. They are packed full of whatever junk and trash our bodies are not supposed to have, but just crave, and I'm sure will hurt us evolutionarily going forward.
And then it's like a cycle because like you have like the fat and the salt, and then that makes you really thirsty. So you grab the drink, and then you're like, oh, I'm hungry again, and then you eat, and it vicious cycle.
Honestly, I don't know how we ever leave Applebee's. Now that you're saying this, it is a pit of. What is it when it's called? A vortex. It's a vortex. This episode is called Kelly Vrooman and the Applebee's Vortex.
Excellent. I'm going to write that down right here. I have had some very interesting experiences at Applebee's, mainly involving expense accounts, but I'm going to save those stories for another day. Kelly was great, though. I'm really hoping. I think we're going to have our first repeat guest, and Kelly's going to come back on sometime in season 2 to talk specifically about Philadelphia, where she lived when she got her big break on the Sunny Side Up show on Sprout TV, the kids show that she was on. Before we go on, I did want to say that a couple of people wrote in on the Kelly Vrooman episode, and AM Grimes 39 said, oh yeah, her mom was my science teacher, because we talked a bit about what it was like growing up as the child of a student, or a child of a teacher rather. And Pem7 said, this is a great share. We love Sprout, and my wife and I are cracking up about this. Kelly, she's outgrown her children's show host roots, so it's no surprise that it's probably a little shocking for people who knew her from that. This one coming up, I'm still pinching myself over this one. Now, Bare Naked Ladies, if you know me at all, I'm Bill, the Bare Naked Ladies guy. They've been my favorite band since around 1999, and I've loved everything that Stephen Page has produced since he left the band, too. He had a situation where he decided to leave the band probably about 10 years ago now, and he's put out a few solo albums, and he does these great live from home live streams that I watch all the time where he plays Request, and I'm actually going to see him live here in Los Angeles, I think next week at the Troubadour. I'm really excited about it. Hopefully, I can snap a picture for all you Where I'm Fromies, which I guess is what I'm going to be calling you now. Now, during the interview, I was too nervous to dig too much into their history since, the band kind of split off in a couple different directions. But Steve was really open about everything and giving as he told stories he's likely told 100 times before about the formation of the band and, their origin story. Most interestingly, he talks about the pressure he felt to stay Canadian as Bare Naked Ladies hit the big time in the United States. That sort of responsibility he felt. But anyway, enough of me rambling.
We didn't know anybody else from Scarborough. We knew them when we would go downtown to Toronto, and then you'd be like, oh, you whatever. So I know Mike Meyer's older brother, Paul, who I'm good friends with, and we opened for his band a bunch and so on. We're like, oh, you grew up in that area or whatever else. And like, you kind of like, it was almost like I was saying before, a bit of a secret. And most of those guys, like Kids in the Hall, are a little bit older than us. So for us, like, they were definitely part of the same scene as us, part of the downtown, like they played rock clubs as opposed to comedy clubs. But they were already, like, when we started playing down there, they were already a big ticket in those clubs. So when we got to know them
Yeah.
better in the 90s, they were kind of at the top of their game. And because we had become successful as well, you end up kind of rubbing shoulders in a different way. Yeah. I was going to say about the Weekend, for example. He's from Scarborough, and he's probably the biggest star ever to come from Scarborough. But you want to or in our day too, would be like Maestro Fresh West was a rapper who was really big in Canada, and he was from Scarborough, and he'd rap about Scarborough places, and you'd be like, he's talking about Scarborough. But like, I'd have to stop if I ever met the Weekend. I would have to like stop myself from kind of like going, hey, Scarborough. I'd have to wait for him. He, being the bigger star, would have to be the one to initiate the point and say Scarborough.
Yeah, and then you could engage with him on that level.
Exactly.
You probably feel a responsibility, right, to kind of like promote that area and give back to that area in your art when you're promoting your art, all that stuff. Where do you think that stems from?
I think part of it for us was, I don't feel that way necessarily now. I do feel grateful for the time I had, but at the time, I felt like there was a Canadian. I hadn't fully figured it out, but Canadians really they like to identify other Canadians out in the world outside of Canada. It's one of these things, and I'm Jewish too, and Jews do this all the time. Like, oh, did you know this actor was Jewish? This guy was Jewish? And so to be, if there was someone who was Canadian and Jewish, like, that's like Leonard Cohen, that's perfect. But
that's your new best friend.
That's right. But so I think as a kid, you're always thinking about that stuff, but adults do it too. But there's always the sense we would have people stop us on the street and say, hey guys, love what you do, stay Canadian. And it was almost like a threat. It was like, you better stay Canadian. Don't go to LA. And even though the people like this don't, who say that stuff, they're probably they're big Neil Young fans. But for some reason, don't you dare go to Los Angeles. Don't you dare follow your dreams. Keep your dreams small. It's a very weird thing. Where it's like, don't get too, if you get big outside of Canada, we might just disown you. And I think some of that comes from things like, I think, especially for our generation, when Gretzky got traded to Los Angeles in '88. It's the same year also when Ben Johnson got accused of cheating in the Olympics and lost his gold medal. And I think those two things were hugely emotional things for Canadians in general. And I think they messed with the Canadian psyche, that Canadians became nervous that they would become somehow laughing stocks, or the thing that made them feel Canadian is all of a sudden no longer Canadian. How do you reconcile that? And I think sometimes Canadians overthink it. So I think we always felt like if we won an award or whatever else, we had to go, hey, Canada, Scarborough, just to let everybody know that we hadn't changed.
And so they didn't throw the full boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese on stage when he came back.
That's right. And but I think now we realize that, like, it wasn't worth it. They'll turn on you anyways. There's nothing you can do to make them not turn on you. When they want to, they will. But we wanted people to, and the idea that we had of, let's show people we haven't changed is kind of bogus, because like, you're allowed to change.
Yeah.
Be aware of where you came from and be grateful for that. But I encourage people to change. You don't have it all figured out when you're 20.
Oh, absolutely not. If I had to live by the decisions of my 20-year-old self, I'd be in a bad place.
Yeah, exactly. I think most of us would.
Drove downtown in the rain, 9:30 on a Tuesday night, just to check out the late night
record shop. Sorry about that. It's my inner BNL fan coming out in my horrible voice, but very excited to actually get to see Steve in person in about a week here in Los Angeles. I don't think I've seen him perform live since about a year and a half before he left the band. So very, very excited for that. I'll also mention, if you're watching this live stream over at Bill Meeks LA on YouTube or on Facebook at facebook.com/whereimfrompodcast, feel free to drop a comment into the chat room. While I'm playing these clips, I'm in there kind of giving some behind the scenes hints at what's happening, but I'd love to feature any reactions you guys have to the clips as we go. All right, speaking of the clips, next up is Ashley Verma. Now, if you've never heard of Ashley Verma, she runs a mommy blog. I hope that's not diminutive. That's just a descriptor called Busy Mumsy. I've known her for years. She sat next to me in high school in personal communications class. And, she went on to be a Broadway dancer and actress. And now she's living, she is kind of living in London, but she's in, I believe, Africa right now with her husband while he's doing some work there. Very fascinating person, very fascinating life. But she's from around the area that I'm from, the Ohio Valley in West Virginia. And honestly, I think this might have been my favorite discussion in season 2, because a lot of times things can keep pretty light and airy, and any drama or firm opinions are coming from my guest. Because we were talking about an area where I'm from, I had some kind of harder opinions about the Ohio Valley too. And she pushed back on that, which I really enjoy when a guest kind of pushes back on, assumptions I'm making in my questions. It makes for an interesting conversation for you guys, hopefully, and it makes for an interesting conversation for me that hopefully leads me somewhere to a new thought, a new process that I hadn't considered before. Just like Ashley did here, defending our hometown from my baggage about our hometown.
Yeah, I'm from that family that grew up with, like, my grandfather worked in the power plants, and my dad did at one point early on before he started his own business. Mm-hmm. I even remember my grandpa Pap. He passed away young. His lungs were black.
Yeah.
They still couldn't actually figure out what really happened. But one day he woke up and his speech just went, and he just quickly went downhill, and there was just nothing you could do. And that's the area, but those were the jobs that were available. I also am from a military family. My grandfather and my uncles, a lot of them are military. My brother was military. He's retired now. So, and that's one of the things that I'm sure you remember, Bill, is and I do find that a lot of people are always fascinated by this. When you go to high school in a state like West Virginia, military start turning up to your school by 9th grade.
Oh, yeah.
By 9th grade, they are handing out pamphlets, whether they're allowed to come in or they have to stand outside near the bus stop, and they're handing them out. I don't know what the rules are now. We're talking about, it's been a minute, but it is. I remember at the entry of Wheeling Park High School, there was tables set up, and men and women decked out in their military garb, and they were handing out pamphlets and all of it. And you were just we're targeted. We are a state that is actually targeted for military.
Yeah, and kind of maliciously too. They would be like, yeah, you're gonna.
Here's 10 grand. Here's 10 grand.
And you'll never have to fight. Don't worry. We're never going to be in a war.
And of course, a 16-year-old's going to go home and be like, Mom, Dad, they're going to give me 10 grand. And then the parents are like, no, sign up. Don't do it. And they're like, oh, I already did.
Well, it's especially in an area like West Virginia, there were some people's parents who didn't make 10 grand in a year. So that was a huge thing. That was life-changing money, or it seemed to be.
My brother went to West Liberty State College. He was supposed to go to Bethany, and that just went to shit. But he ended up going to West Liberty. And again, this goes back to, he was a great runner. But my brother, he needed, I feel like he needed someone to tell him, constantly coach, be right next to him. Because the minute, if he was in a bigger group, he'd be like, well, they're all doing it, so I might as well. And I think that when he went to West Liberty, he kind of got himself into the wrong crowd, and it wasn't good. And I remember my mom, we were talking about it not too long ago. She goes, oh, I remember when he came home one day after, I think he was in a fraternity that was not West Liberty approved. Mm. And my mom goes, I remember him calling and being like, I want out of here, and this is how we're going to have to do it.
Mhm.
And then he was like, I have an officer was coming to the house, I think like that Monday or Tuesday. And he was like, Mom, I'm coming home. We're going to sit with this officer and we're going to make a game plan. And he did. Like, he brought the officer in, and my mom and my dad sat there. My brother signed up to the Air Force. It was the best thing he ever could have done. Were my parents like pushing him in that department? Absolutely not. Everyone in our family actually are Air Force. So, but he at one point thought he was going to go Army, and my mom was like, absolutely not. No, you are not cut for the Army. No. Let's make you an engineer instead. So yeah, that's the route that he went, but that's what he needed. And I tell you what, I couldn't be more proud of him for flourishing that he did. And he served for 26 years, and very proud of him. And now he's retired and, resides in Virginia, another state for anyone listening, another state, separate to West Virginia.
West Liberty State College, now university. I think I went there myself, and it can be challenging for people because it's like you're so isolated up there. There's like one or two things off campus to do, so you just end up in a dorm room every night, like drinking your ass off, and you can just kind of lose sight of things sometimes.
Yeah, I think that anywhere that you go, again, I was talking to a family not long ago about Broadway and going to New York and all that kind of stuff. I think it just depends on your support network. And my brother, Seth, he had a support network, but I don't think that he always reached out. And I'm thankful that he reached out when he knew like, oh, shit has hit the fan and like, I need to like get it together. And, he was 21. And, I'm so thankful that he did. And he did a wonderful job, and he did great and got all sorts of accolades through the years and all those things. But I think that no matter where you go, no matter where you live, and then you decide to go somewhere else, it takes thick skin, broad shoulders, and a good good communication with your people, or you will sink. No matter where you go, you could live in LA and then move to New York. That's a completely different different animal. East Coast, West Coast, completely different. Middle America, completely different.
I always heard it referred to as the wheeling magnet, but it kind of applies to the Ohio Valley, where people end up getting stuck there, or they go and try and do something and they come back there. And it comes down to support, right? Like, it took me I think 3 or 4 launches to finally get out of the Valley. And it was because, I didn't really have that kind of support at home to where I couldn't necessarily call home and be like, hey, I'm in trouble. Can you send me $50, $100 so I can make my rent or anything like that. And it made it almost impossible. So there I'd go back on the bus, back to Wheeling for a few months. So, but even, if you're trying to stay in the area and do something in the area, I mean, a support network is the difference between success and failure a lot of times.
Massively. Yeah.
But Ashley was a lot of fun to talk to. Very interesting, because it was always kind of like how there are cliques in high school. We were sort of in 2 different cliques, but they overlapped a little bit. So we never really had like really in-depth conversations in high school. So it was really cool to talk with her for an hour or so about her life and her perspective on the Valley. All right, next up is Jason Inmon. Jason Inmon, if you might know him as the former host of DC All Access for DC Comics. Now he's a writer. He writes comic books and he works in TV writers' rooms and stuff. And he's a really cool, friendly dude. We had a lot of fun moments throughout the episode, but my favorite moment was the birth of a new game that I've included several times since then because it's so much fun. It's called What If It Happened Here? Now this game, basically what the premise of the game is I give them, some sort of story or IP or property, a movie, a TV show, a comic book, and ask them, what if it happened in your hometown? How would that change the story? It's really creative, really fun. And I also get to incorporate AI artwork into it, which is something I've been playing around with Stable Diffusion. Because basically what happens is, we're dealing with hypotheticals in this game. So when we deal with a hypothetical, I use the AI generator, Stable Diffusion, along with Photoshop and some collage skills to make actual B-roll for things that don't exist, which is a kind of fun and kind of challenging and comes more into play in an episode coming up. But why don't we go ahead and play Jason Inmon playing the first game of What If It Happened Here. So you're a big comic book fan. So you already know Superman hailed from a small town in Kansas. We've talked about it. But most other superheroes come from urban environments. So in this game, I'm going to give you a superhero, and I want you to tell me how their origin would be different if their story was set in Stark, Kansas, and not New York or Gotham or whatever.
Okay, all right, interesting.
So first up, Batman. How would Batman be different if it was set in Stark, Kansas?
Okay, if Batman was set in Stark, Kansas, his parents would die in a head-on collision with a deer. They would not be shot. And I have a feeling he might still be Batman, but his costume would be that wooded camouflage that you see all the hunters wearing. And I kind of think he'd be a game warden because he would want to reduce the deer population.
Yeah, absolutely. Take advantage or take a revenge on that deer.
To take revenge against too many deer. Yeah.
Okay, Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, if she grew up in Stark, Kansas, I'm just going to say that she's still an Amazonian. I really think she would make Stark, Kansas the most advanced city on the earth. She would make it a sort of white Wakanda, as you know, or a redneck Wakanda of sorts. Because I'm going to guess that she's part God, so she's got that knowledge inside of her, and she's going to she will completely revolutionize Kansas. That's what Wonder Woman would do.
Okay, Spider-Man.
Well, I hate to say it. I think if Peter Parker grows up in Stark, Kansas, I think he just becomes a science teacher at the local high school, and that's it. And that's the end, because he will be bullied more so than Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson is a lightweight, I'll just tell you that, compared to some of the bullies I experienced.
Plus, Stark, Kansas is probably never going to finance a school trip to New York City for the big,
Nope. There's also, and if he gets bit by the spider somehow, there's nothing to swing from. So.
The Boys.
The Boys?
The Boys. It's an extreme.
That's a tough one, because they're sort of a global, okay, well, I'll flip it on this side. If Homelander of The Boys, the evil Superman, is raised in Stark, Kansas, there is no The Boys, because he becomes just like Superman.
Very good point. Very good point.
So there you go. So The Boys don't exist in Stark, Kansas.
I bet a lot of people in the Boys universe wish that was the case. Okay, John Constantine.
Okay. Well, here's the truth. If John Constantine exists in Stark, Kansas, first off, he's not English. He's going to be a Native American. And he's probably going to be a Native American shaman of some type, because there are all types of ghost stories. And in fact, a lot of it's going to be sort of plant-based and more rural ghosts. I actually think John Constantine might be pretty interesting in Stark, Kansas.
I definitely agree. And, he does have connections to Swamp Thing, so it just makes sense that there would be other creatures of the green.
There could be Wheat Thing. Yeah.
Wheat Thing, exactly.
Yeah. Sounds like a drink you get from a smoothie place. Wheat Thing. I'll take a Wheat Thing, please.
Okay, and last but not least, Fantastic Four.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so Ben Grimm would be fine because he's a football guy. Johnny would be fine because he's one of the bullies. So if the Fantastic Four are in Stark, Kansas, then that means that Reed is going to supersonic a combine of some type. And then that's the accident. Dr. Doom gets mangled in a combine accident, like a Thrasher accident. That's how he gets all mangled up. And they will all have some sort of plant-based powers. So they'll shoot wheat stalks out of their hands and stuff like that. Like Ben Grimm will be a walking wheat plant, walking around, or he'll be full of Milo and fescue, if you know what that is. Well.
I like this too, because it's irrespective of era. You could set it in the modern day. You could set it 50 years ago. It would be about the same story.
Can you tell that my hometown is surrounded by fields? I don't know if are you putting together this connection? I've been kind of subtle about it. I don't know if you've caught up.
You did not see the B-roll I used in your intro at the beginning of the show, but lots of field. All right. Okay. Well, that's the game. And I think you won.
Did I?
I don't know what you won, but you absolutely did win. Okay. You can put that on your resume.
Okay. I'm going to say that I won the Start Kansas Citizen of the Year award.
Excellent. And I will back you up on that. You can give people my number.
We're going to put it right here. There's going to be some article. Somebody put this on Wikipedia that Jason Inmon won the Start Kansas Citizen of the Year award. We're going to make it a thing right now.
And for the record, I have got several phone calls about Jason, and I have backed him up every time. No, but it was a really great, fun conversation. And I will say too, Jason, if you're watching this, you, out of all the guests I've had, you were probably one of the most supportive in terms of, sharing the link to the episode, which I really appreciate every time. All right. Next up though, is this guy was a huge get. I was pleased as punch to be talking to him. Stephen Tobolowsky. He's a legend. You probably know him from Groundhog's Day or Heroes or Silicon Valley or a million other things he's excelled in and kicked ass in. One of the interesting things about interviewing him was sometimes you have to ask a bunch of follow-up questions or keep them talking. Some interviews later, for example, kind of had to do that a little bit. With Stephen Tobolowsky, you just put a quarter in and he'll go all day. Honestly, I think we recorded for 2 hours and change. He easily, if his grandchild hadn't been coming over, he could have gone for another hour easy. And in fact, I want to try and get him back on sometime because the dude just has so many stories. That's actually because, I've been thinking about how to have people back on. And I think, the premise of the show is where I'm from, right? But I think in a lot of ways, we kind of have to stretch that a little bit if we want to have people back on. So maybe a different place they've been from, like maybe Stephen Tobolowsky's from Hollywood could be a good example. But anyway, this clip from Stephen Tobolowsky's interview features him telling the story of an early lesson he learned at a Dallas landmark, Daughtry's Pharmacy. Well, I brought you here today to talk a little bit about Dallas. Dallas is a huge city with a lot of local businesses. When we were going back and forth setting all this up, you mentioned one of those businesses that you really had fond memories of, which was, I believe it's Daughtry's?
Yeah. Daughtry's Drugstore.
Daughtry's Drugstore, yeah. And it has a ton of history in the area going back to 1929. I was digging in on research. I'm going to find out all about this. I was like, you know what? I have Stephen Tobolowsky on the show. Why don't I just ask him? He can probably give me a better idea.
Now, you should explain to the audience, because you kind of led the people on to think that we actually had some substantive discussion about Daughtry's Drugstore. This is the first time I'm hearing, this is all your research. This is everything you've dug up on this. This is fascinating.
Oh, really?
I mean, you mentioned, you said what list, and I said, well, Daughtry's Drugstore, but that's the only thing we had was the name. You did all the research.
Thank you. Credit where credit's due.
Exactly.
I'm awesome, I guess.
Exactly.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about it beyond what I did on my research? I mean, I have tax documents and stuff, but you have the emotional stuff.
I have the emotional documents. So my elementary school I went to was Jeff Davis Elementary School. Yes, it was named after the president of the Confederacy.
Ooh.
Jefferson Davis Elementary School.
Little awkward.
Kind of at Keystone Polk streets in Oak Cliff. And right across the street was Daughtry's Drugstore, Ben Franklin's. They ended up putting a pizza in. It was the first time I ever heard of the word pizza. But Daughtry's Drugstore, we had a deal when I was there at Jeff Davis from 1st to 4th grade. So we walked to school back then. Even as a first grader, we walked the mile to school in the morning and walked home. Parents just let their kids do this. And
I was going to say uphill both ways, but it's Texas, so that wouldn't be flat both ways.
It had a major uphill and a downhill, a major uphill and a downhill, either way you went. And so after school, from first grade on, I would cross the street sideways. Instead of going straight home, I would go over across the street to Doherty's drugstore.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they had this policy to where kids could just pick the comic books, off of the display. And they had all of them, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the works. And go to the back of Doherty's. They had a little sitting area where people waited to get their prescriptions and sit down and read the comic books. And also, maybe if you wanted to buy something, Coke or something like that, you could buy a Coke and sit at the back of Doherty's drugstore.
So they would treat it kind of like a comic book library where you could just grab an issue, go read it, and put it back. Don't have to pay the 15 cents. Just buy something to drink while you're there.
Or 25 cents if it was the Batman Super. The big Batman thing was 25 cents back then. And I think the
Mega Digest.
I think the regular comic books back then were a dime. And I think the big super ones were like 25 cents is what we're talking about. And so I went to Doherty's every day I could with all my friends. And then I had a moment in which Satan tapped my shoulder. And I see that kids go through this kind of thing all the time. I thought, what if I stole something? I wonder what that would be like. And they had lifesavers for like 20, 25 cents. And I thought, I could just put this roll of lifesavers in my pocket and walk out of here and no one would know what I did. I had the quarter, but I wanted to see what it's like to steal something. So
get that rush.
I stole the lifesavers, walked out, and on the walking home, I immediately was attacked by conscience and thought, what the hell did you do? What are you doing? And I thought, maybe when I pass the creek, I'll just throw the lifesavers into the water. I'll just throw them into the water and just pretend like the whole thing never happened. Like not eat a lifesaver. I didn't want to eat a stolen lifesaver. Then I went home and I was really shaken. And my mother noticed it. And she came to me and said, Steppy Doors, which is what she called me. Steppy Doors, is there something wrong? And I told her, I said, Mom, I stole these lifesavers. And she looked at me just hard and very seriously. She says, sweetheart, you know that's wrong, don't you? Yes, ma'am. Well, you know what you have to do? No, ma'am. You have to go back to Doherty's drugstore and you have to take those lifesavers and give them back to the lady at the counter and tell her you took these, it was wrong, you're sorry, and you'll never do it again. So I thought, okay, there's the solution. There's the solution to my problem. So I went back to Doherty's drugstore. And on the way, I passed the creek. I thought, throw them away. Just throw the lifesavers away. Don't talk to the lady at Doherty's drugstore. Just throw the lifesavers away. It'll all go away. And I came back and I went up to the lady and I put the lifesavers on the counter. And I said, excuse me, I just took these lifesavers earlier this afternoon from here. And I took them without paying it, and I want to return them, and I'm very sorry. And I was expecting absolution. Instead, what happened was the woman looked at me, took the lifesavers, and said, you are banned forever from coming into this store.
Wow.
I never want to see your face here again. Leave now, never come back. And that was the end of me and Doherty's drugstore. And I learned about consequences. I learned primarily at the very tender age, I was 10, about 10, about regret. And regret is something that sticks with you your entire life. I still have an ache in my soul over those damn lifesavers. And I've never stolen anything again because of it. But it was a very hard lesson, and it was the end of my days of reading Superman and Batman for free.
I guess you're probably lucky that they weren't there either. They would have busted you before you even got out the door.
Right.
And that was Stephen Tobolowsky. Great conversation with him. I have been notified by someone out there watching the live stream that the comments aren't working for some reason. It looks like I have it all set up, but if you're trying to leave a comment, maybe tweet me at Bill Meeks over on Twitter, and I'll see that pop up on my phone as we're going. It's weird though, because it's letting me comment. Anyway, enough about that. The recorded people don't care. Have you been enjoying the free samples? I've been enjoying giving you the free samples. Here's a free sample for you, some crackers. But you know, these crackers smell really, really good. I would love to eat one, but I can't do that while I'm talking to you. So why don't we play a quick ad from our sponsor, Strean Studio, and we'll be right back with more. Where I'm From is brought to you by Strean Studio. That's STREANN Studio, the web app that puts you in charge of the live show. Strean Studio allows you to take your streaming game to the next level by allowing you to stream to multiple platforms at once. If you want to go to Twitch, if you want to go to YouTube, you can stream to all of those platforms at once, get feedback from your audience, and most importantly, it puts you in control of the show. Now, Strean Studio has several packages that work for just about any type of broadcaster. From the free plan, where you can stream with a watermark, all the way up to the gold plan, where you can have up to 8 guests. You can stream to as many social platforms as you want. You can get a web link to share your show with external audiences, and you can even get an iframe so you can embed your live stream show directly into your website. Hey, I love Strean Studio so much, I'm using it to produce this show. I want to thank Strean Studio for supporting Where I'm From, and you can give this fantastic software a spin and support Where I'm From at the same time. Just head over to our website at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom and click on the Strean Studio banner so they know we sent you their way. I'm sorry, I'm eating a free sample. These are really good crackers though. They were free. Thanks again, Strean Studio, for sponsoring this episode and every episode of Where I'm From. You should never eat on camera, Bill. You should never eat on camera. Okay, next up, this was probably the most experimental episode we did all season. I interviewed a fictional character about where they're from. Kelly Rands from the Humor Mill Orlando, remember I mentioned him earlier, joined me as Santa for my first improvised episode. Gosh, we had a lot of fun. So much fun. It was interesting though, because I told him, why don't we use the Rankin Bass, the Life and Times of Santa Claus as our sort of like source material for you to answer the questions to. And in a lot of ways, we ended up throwing a lot of that out because he had so many fun bits about Central Florida where Kelly lives and everything that I thought it was better to keep it simpler, which we did, hopefully. Now, this clip is from another one of the games we play all the time, Wheel of Anecdotes. Basically, what this game is I throw out a word or a phrase, and they have to give me back a little story, a little mini story about that word or phrase. So since Santa isn't real, much like I did with the Jason Inmon clip I played earlier, I relied a lot on AI artwork and stable diffusion to make the B-roll for this game, because he was talking about like this thing happened and this thing happened, but that thing didn't actually happen. So I made it happen using the power of AI. I also think there's a lot of controversy about AI artwork. I thought it was a really great tool to help yes and the improv between me and Kelly throughout the episode. But maybe you feel differently. I don't know. Why don't we play the clip and find out? We're going to let you go in just a second, but I do have one more game for you. And this game is called Wheel of Anecdotes. Now, I'm going to give you a suggestion, and your challenge is to respond with a short anecdote from the North Pole. The shorter, the better. Now, Santa, do you think you can handle it?
I'll try my best. Ooh.
Okay, first up, Rudolph.
VIP. VIP. If you want to get into a bar, He's your guy. Talk about VIPs. That nose gives him away every time.
What's the wildest night out you ever had with Rudolph?
Oh, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Fair enough. Oh, sorry. I just tapped the side of my nose twice. That's not offensive to you, is it? I know that's kind of your thing.
No. It's fine. It's perfect because you don't have the power. You see, if I do it, then it's fine. If you do it, you just got an itchy nose.
Okay. Next up, Santa, sleigh.
Broken. Our sleighs are constantly broken.
Really?
It's the highest single thing. We only use them one night a year, except for those special trips that I mentioned, and they are consistently broken. I get ridiculously long invoices for broken sleds. I wonder what we do with our sleighs, but perhaps they're being joy-ridden or something like that. I don't know, but it's one of the highest expenses we deal with. So it's expensive and broken, I might say.
Santa, pro tip, I have heard that Ford has a new extended drivetrain warranty on their sleighs. You might want to look into that next time you need to replace it.
Yeah, I'll check that, although vehicles are very expensive right now. It's
absolutely.
And there's even Santa hates going to the car dealership. Oh,
yeah. Oh. In some ways, sometimes buying a used sleigh is more expensive than buying a brand new one.
Yes, because you've got to rework it again, and they're probably that you don't know the people that you bought it from. I bought one from the Arendelle people once, and it was all broken, and it just I just let it go. I couldn't take it anymore.
Nice. Okay, Santa, immortality.
Lengthy. I will have to say that is the one sort of crazy thing about my life is that I can't die. So I can't die. So I'm here. I'm always here. Even if I accidentally do something, I'm still here. So lengthy might be. It's a long life, a good life, but a long life that will never end.
Have you ever gone through like an existential crisis with that where you were like trying to see if you could end it or?
Oh, no. Okay. I definitely haven't. I haven't done a Groundhog Day type of thing at all. That
would be pretty dark for Christmas. So I'm glad you said no.
I understand it, but I don't think I could get myself there.
All right, two more here. Disney World.
Oh, Disney World is the second most magical place on Earth. Some might say the third if you go to Disneyland, but that's obviously we know my home is the most magical place on Earth. Of course it is. But Disney's World and Land are both very good. They're very fun.
What's your favorite ride, Santa?
I'm partial to the mountains. I love Space Mountain, and I got to ride the new one that they just opened, or they're going to be opening soon, with the trains on the tracks, and there's the other trains on the other tracks. It's based on a movie, something like Ron or Mon or
Tron.
Yes, Tron. Yeah. Very fun. Good ride. I didn't understand any of it, but it was a good ride.
I guess it's been a few years since you've had to hand out Tron toys, so I understand why you don't remember the movie.
Like all of the children not asking for stuff for the Way of Water. Like for some reason we expected that maybe to be a big deal. Disney keep telling us it was a big deal, but we just couldn't make any toys for it. We figured it was just not worth it.
I don't think you're alone in that, Santa. A lot of people keep thinking this is going to be a big deal, and is it? Probably not.
We'll see. I guess we'll find out.
All right, and last but not least, Mrs. Claus.
Ooh, sexy. She is a fiery redhead, remember. I've known her for 800 years. She also is German-Polish descent, too. But I have a thing for redheads. I, of course, originally was a redhead myself, and she will always be my love. And, Santa loves his lady, always loves his one.
Some have said, Santa, that keeping her kind of penned up in the North Pole, except when you go on your vacations and stuff, is a little like old-fashioned and sexist. How would you respond to that?
Well, and she chooses to. She likes to be there by herself.
She's a homebody.
Yes. She's actually very comfortable living there and very happy with it. So I would be more than happy to find opportunities for her to leave, but she really does love the North Pole, and she does very good with the elves, better than I do. So that's one thing that that she just has a knack for, dealing with little men. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that you don't have like a lower register in your hearing. Maybe it's easier for her to hear their voices.
Oh, that could be. Maybe, that would probably make sense a little bit. But I try the best I can for an authoritarian toy maker, but one can only do so much, right?
Wheel of anecdotes. I just wanted to mention a couple pieces of feedback on the Santa episode. Wyoming Country Boy, and this is in regards to me using AI artwork to generate B-roll for the Santa episode. Loved your work for some time, Bill, but be careful. You might make enemies in the anti-AI community who will brigade you, and spread lies for daring to use AI art. I keep an eye on the comment section of your videos. Just a heads up. Now, I haven't got any negative pushback really on it, but it's really, it's a tool just like any other. Painters and photographers were kind of when Photoshop came out too. But it's just like, in my opinion, it's a natural evolution of technology. And as a creator, it's given me all sorts of ideas for ways I can, cut out the middleman and create my own artwork for my different projects. So let's continue the conversation, though. Shoot me an email at bill@billmeeks.com if you have any AI artwork picadillos. And then Ghost Cyclone said from the Santa episode, the guy with the thick red glasses and creeper beard looks like he'll lecture about how words are violence. I'm not sure if that's an insult or compliment. Either way, thank you very much, Ghost Cyclones. And then last but not least, Trevor said, awesome work. Good to see SD, Stable Diffusion, getting some love in your workflow. Thanks, Trevor. I'm really enjoying playing around with it. I just set up a whole new Bill Meeks model so I can generate pictures of myself yesterday. It's a lot of fun. And I kind of want to bring Kelly back on throughout the year to play other fictional characters, maybe Cupid, maybe a leprechaun for St. Patrick's Day, stuff like that. I thought that would be fun, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so America's Next Top Podcaster brought me the pilot that became this show, Where I'm From, right? But another thing it brought me was a portfolio of really targeted short podcasting samples. We did all sorts of, me in September and everyone else I worked with throughout the competition, did comedy podcast, news podcast, sort of short form documentary podcast, all these different game shows, which gave me a lot of really great samples to put together a focused portfolio of podcasts. That portfolio helped me land a job. I have it's not a full-time job, but it's all the time job, editing a podcast called The Frontier Podcast from a tech startup called Gun.io, which I really like because they're more of a curated version of, like, if you remember Elance back in the day, where I kind of built my career. But it was kind of shady at the same time. Gun.io is more curated, and it's for professionals, professional coders and web developers, things like that. So I decided, about midway through the season, why don't I bring on my boss from Gun.io? Because it would be fun just to, normally we talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes here or there about the podcast itself. It would be nice to kind of get to know this person I'm working for who lives in Nashville. So I asked Faith Benson to come onto the show and talk about growing up in upstate New York. Now, when she mentioned that there was sort of a true crime angle to the area where she was from, I knew I had to dig in on that because true crime is big, right? Everybody loves true crime. Podcasting has been overtaken by true crime, and apparently there was a juicy unresolved murder at a local ski resort where you're from. So why don't you tell people a little bit about that? Trying to get those numbers.
Oh, yeah. Well, people are always searching for like ski wing murder, new news, and there never is. But yeah, so this is in the 70s. There was a ski resort actually right next to my grandparents' house. Mm-hmm. And by resort, I mean, like, I don't know how many runs there were, maybe 10 runs. people who actually were alive then and skied this hill are going to come for me for being incorrect with all this data, but it was small.
I don't think true crime fans are necessarily focused on the facts. They're focused on like the sexiness of the crime. You know?
Yeah, I don't think they're worried about how many ski runs there are. I'm from a ski family though, so my family's going to be like, what do you mean you got that wrong? Anyway. Yeah, so in the 70s, there was a double homicide at the ski resort. So there were 2 groomers who were there grooming, and they were robbed, and it seems like the robbery went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 folks were killed, and it's never been solved. Whoever committed the murder stole a safe.
That's a hard thing to steal.
Yeah, it was like in the ground, like they had to like drill it out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So they stole that. And from what I remember, there was not a whole lot of money inside. And then that safe was found actually by my childhood home. There's like a abandoned bridge. And it was found kind of like tossed off that bridge. I think it was like shortly after the crime that they found it.
Gotcha.
And I think there's been like varying degrees of interest and activity with this investigation over the last, 50 years? Holy smokes. But generally, I think it's pretty cold. I think folks think they know who it was, and it's such a small town that it's like, well, it's probably somebody we know. And I don't know, just kind of lost steam, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess, if it happened in the 70s at this point, even if they figure out who actually did it, they're probably not there to prosecute at this point.
Right. Or if they are, it's like a family. I think everybody kind of thinks it was a family, like an organized crime family.
Oh, okay. It was a hit.
Yeah, it's like something that kind of comes up every couple of years in my hometown, and people remember, and they're like, oh my gosh, we got to figure this out, and nothing happens.
Is there any sort of like tourism related to it? Like, or do people like stop into town to like investigate or see the landmarks or anything?
No, when I was a kid, the thing was, when you first got your license and you're just trying to like wreak havoc during witching hour, you drive up to Ski Wing and park your car because the rumor was that it was haunted. So this happened, and then I think before this happened, there was an accident on the ski lift where a little boy was killed.
Ooh.
Yeah, so the thing was, you go to Ski Wing to see ghosts, or if you're really badass, you go to Ski Wing and carry your skis up the hill and ski down the super messy terrain. So. Yeah, not open to the public unless you're an 18-year-old with little regard for the law.
It's come up a couple times, skiing. Do you have a passion for skiing that you kind of took advantage of while you lived there?
I have a passion for drinking bourbon and beer in the lodge after I do a couple runs. I'm not a competitive skier. My mom is a ski racer. My sister's a really great skier. Cousins, aunts, uncles are all good skiers. I have never fallen. I'm a very cautious skier. I don't do it nearly as often as I probably should, but every time I go home, we do go. There's a town called Ellicottville, which is like 10 minutes from where I grew up. And they've got 2 different real resorts, not like Ski Wing resorts. So we do that quite often.
So you said you've never been injured. Have you ever done anything competitively? Have you ever raced on skis or anything like that?
Bill, this might come to a surprise to you because we work together, and like at work, I'm pretty competitive, but in anything that has to do with like physical fitness, whatever the opposite of competitive is, that's what I am. Like I would like stop swimming during swim meets and like cheer for the other people. Like, go ahead, you got this.
Easily distracted.
Yeah, and also just like not interested in trying. So that's probably a personality flaw. But
I don't ski. I've never skied. I've snowboarded a couple times and I hurt myself every time, so I don't do that. But a lot of fun conversation there with Faith. Check out that episode. It's a fun one. Now, this next episode, it was kind of unusual. The season finale was a solo stream where I memorialized my lifelong friend and creative collaborator, Stephen Carroll. It was cathartic and well received. So I expect that I'll probably be doing more of these for some other friends I've lost along the way in season 2. I've started If you're listening and you knew Brett Kane, I've been compiling clips to do a Brett-centric episode, who was also a very dear friend of mine. But this clip from the Steve episode tells the tale of how a failed collaboration between me and Steve ended up being the theme song to my first successful original podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard of Greetings from Storybrooke, but you're about to hear the origin of this Greetings from Storybrooke origin story. Like I said, me and Steve, over the years, we didn't quite connect on Classic Tragic Hero at that point, although we were always trying to. But I kind of went off and became a freelance video producer where I would make advertisements and explainer videos, all sorts of stuff like that for various internet startups. One of them, I was lucky enough to find an opportunity to bring Steve on for. There's a podcast out there that's still going on called Sword and Laser with Tom Merritt and Veronica Belmont. And back in, I think, 2005 or no, 2010, something like 2008, somewhere in the late 2000s, or the late aughts, they got picked up as a video YouTube show on Felicia Day's YouTube channel, Geek and Sundry. So I knew Tom from various things, like I was a big, constantly in the chat room over on This Week in Tech Network where he worked. And so he reached out to me to see if I wanted to do the animation for him. He didn't explain necessarily that they already had a theme song they were 1,000% happy with and wanted to use for the TV show. So I reached out to Steve about putting together a theme song for the show. I asked him if he wanted to, I thought it would be a fun idea to base the music off of an 80s show called CBS Storybrooke, which was an anthology show that would do adaptations of various junior high school kid novels, like How to Eat Fried Worms is one that pops into mind. But I always loved like this big epic opening they had. So I was like, that would be good for Sword and Laser too. So here for the first time, I'm going to play you what ended up becoming the intro for the show with the original music I commissioned Steve to write it for. You might find this a little familiar. We'll see.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sword and Laser Show. I'm Veronica Belmont.
And I'm Tom Merritt.
And if you followed any of my work at all, you probably recognized that song that was being played as the theme song to Greetings from Storybrooke, a Once Upon a Time podcast that I did with my wife, Anne-Marie DeSimone, for a number of years. This is all going to stay in. So we started off Greetings from Storybrooke, and Steve's theme opened and closed over 200 episodes downloaded by tens of thousands of listeners over the course of the years where we're doing Greetings from Storybrooke. It was a fan cast focused on the ABC TV show Once Upon a Time, set in a town called Storybrooke. So I thought Steve's take on the CBS Story Break inspired theme fit the bill. Plus, Steve had already made it, and I felt bad I couldn't use it in a more high-profile project. The theme song worked great, though, and it often got compliments from listeners. I probably should have forwarded more of those compliments on to Steve, but I think he knows how appreciated it was. Greetings from Storybrooke. I'm Bill Meeks.
And I'm Anne-Marie DeSimone.
And Anne-Marie, we are here for a very special episode today.
We're going to have a very special episode.
A very special
with some
episode.
Serious topics to talk about tonight.
Yes, oh, wait a second. Where'd Anne-Marie go? It's the masked woman with the fairy wand. I don't know.
There are too many props sitting here. I can't resist.
Sad Steve Steve passed away, but it makes me smile every time I see the Greetings from Storybrooke stuff, because that was such a fundamental time in my life. Maybe one day I'll do an episode. Bill Meeks is from Greetings from Storybrooke. But at the bare minimum, again, I'm going to be doing an episode sometime this season on Brett Kane and Ryan Horde. So if you're from where I'm from and you remember Brett or Ryan, go ahead and shoot me some memories, bill@billmeeks.com. Deborah Kerr, in response to the Steve episode, wrote, "Condolences on the loss of your wonderful friend and creative partner. I really enjoyed learning more about Stephen and his contributions to your work. Thanks very much." And she was involved in several projects that Steve was also involved with. So it was probably kind of cool for her to see behind the scenes. All right, so next up is another childhood hero of mine, Paul Zaloom, who you might know better as Beekman from Beekman's World. Now, I love Beekman growing up, so this episode was a thrill, but it was a little weird too, because we had some tech issues up front getting set up and everything. Like, he was emailing me, and on my phone, the email he was using only checks every half an hour, 40 minutes or something like that. So I wasn't getting his messages that he was having problems connecting. And I was actually pacing around here in the office like, oh man, it's only the second episode and the guest is already backing out on me. We eventually got it sorted out, but it made things tense at the beginning of the episode. And I was a little worried that it was going to go south and be like an interview I did with Billy West a number of years ago for a site called Bleeding Cool. But luckily, things kind of smoothed out over the course of it, and we had a really great conversation. But as a fan of Beekman growing up, I try and keep this focused on the area where they're from, but sometimes the fanboy comes out, and I had to dig into the details of producing a national kids show. And I also, I've learned something that I wish I had known when I was a kid.
Because kids don't make a big differentiation between the person on the screen and the person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're looking at some celebrity or whatever. They're looking at somebody like their uncle in the room.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to pick letters out of the bin. We had a bin on the stage that went around and around in the part of the show, and a hand would go in and pull a letter out. I would just go in and pull letters out, and if they had return addresses, I'd call information, get the kid's phone number, and call them up from the set just as a goof.
Wow.
And I remember calling one kid who lived in Chinatown on Mott Street or Mulberry Street in Manhattan, just near where I lived. I lived near Canal Street in Tribeca.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the kid and he said, "Hey, thanks for calling, but like I'm in the middle of something." I go, that's the end of the phone conversation.
Beekman got big timed.
Yeah, it was great. I loved that. I thought that was really cool.
That pisses me off just a little bit, because I never wrote into you because I was like, oh, there's no way they actually read the letters. Like, this is just like, so you can get a sticker or something. I'm never going to write in. Here to find out, you could just walk around the set one day and you could have picked up Billy Meeks' letter.
Right.
Missed opportunity for me anyway.
They did respond to all the letters. I think they responded with postcards, and supposedly we got 1,500 a week at our high point. I mean, I don't know how much the letters really inspired what we did on the show, because I think the writers had to say, okay, here are all the issues we need to cover, or we want to cover. We could figure out a way to cover, because the writers were all very interested in science.
Mm-hmm.
And then find a letter that matched that. Because in the beginning, the letters were fake because we didn't have anybody writing in, because the show wasn't on the air. But after a short while, they were real kids writing in, and we read the real kids' letters on the air.
And it was a really great conversation with Paul. Once we got over that hump of like technical problems, throwing a thing on the vibe, man. There was a thing on the vibe, but we got through it. And it was a really fun conversation. Next up, I'm going to play a clip from my friend Brian Brushwood, who came on the show. This is another one where we're from the same town. I was born and raised until I was about 8 or 9 years old in a small town called Katy, Texas, where Brian also grew up. We didn't know each other, but anytime I talk to Brian, Katy, Texas, as a common hometown, always comes up. It's that in the Indonesia trip. If I'm talking to Brian, those two things are going to come up. But sometimes on Where I'm From, the conversations, well, they're usually bright and light, but sometimes they can get a little philosophical, like this exchange between Brian, who's a magician, and myself about the self-proclaimed city of churches where we grew up in Katy, Texas. When I think about Katy, it's very much for me connected to church. And Katy also used to be known as the city of churches. And when I lived there, it felt like everyone went to church, partially because some of the only socialization I got was at church. But I was wondering if you went to church, and if not, did it hurt you socially?
Oh no, I definitely did. I went to United Methodist, the one close to Williamsburg Settlement, and it was a foundational part of my early high school life. You know, it was that good social opportunity to bond. It's interesting because, like, I'm thankful for that experience. Although I myself have matured into what I like to think of as hardcore agnosticism. But
radical agnostic. Yeah.
Radical agnostic. That's a great phrase. Okay. That's what I'm going to do. It was a wonderful experience. And it confused me when I started having kids of my own, where it's like, I think about where I am in my personal interest in various faiths. And I think about how much value I got out of it. And I didn't know whether or not to push or allow the opportunity for my kids or whatever. And so we kind of have a spread where some of the kids were involved in youth programs and others were not. I don't know what the right answer there is.
Yeah. My rule was always going to be, we won't expose them to church at all until they can do algebra, because that's like the right combination of concrete and like abstract thinking to maybe handle religion. And by the time we got to that point, none of them were very much interested.
And that's the problem, right? Is if what you want is to have them plugged into a, traditional values, although religiously themed way to interact with locals. And again, Katy was pretty much like, everybody went to church, as you mentioned.
The city of churches. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer in that, because it's like the kids that went to youth programs, I was not sending them there to indoctrinate them or to have them, adopt certain values. I was sending them there so they could have an opportunity to socialize and to...
Yeah, for community. Yeah,
exactly.
That's actually one thing I kind of feel like I've kind of missed with my kids on, is that lack of community. Because I mean, they have friends from school. They go out and do things with them, but there's not like someplace we go every week or a couple times a week where we see the same big group of people or anything.
When one of our kids was an infant, Bonnie pointed out that she had read that, look, your job as a parent is not to make them eat their vegetables. Your job, because their bodies will get hungry for certain vegetables if they are deficient in certain nutrients or minerals or what have you. That's part of the reason that we have weird cravings for particular foods at times. So your obligation as a parent is simply to set the opportunity in front of them. And if they feel like there's something in there they need, then they can take from it.
Yeah, I think the thing is like, I grew up in a Baptist church, so this was probably a bit more apparent there, but they tend to like really hyper focus on the kids because they're so like malleable, and you can like convince them of certain truths that you believe in before they have a chance to critically think about it. And
and again, I don't want to make it a bag on thing, but it sounds like the fact that you were homeschooled, were you homeschooled for religious reasons?
100%, absolutely. When I was in first grade, they were going to start doing like basic like sex ed, human anatomy stuff in second grade. And my mom was like, okay, we're pulling them out and, we're doing the religious thing, Becca books and all that.
Yeah. In that regard, I guess I air quotes lucked out. I don't know who's lucky and who's not, but I remember my friend Justin saying that, Methodists are a 6-pack away from atheists.
Absolutely. Because my grandma Meeks was a Methodist actually. And she didn't really care at all. And like, I would go up to Wadsworth, Ohio and spend a week with her every summer. And about halfway through the week, she would start dogging on how kind of militant Baptist my parents were, and like, you need to let people live, and you need to watch films that have cursing in them and things like that. You need to grow, which is why I always loved visiting my grandma Meeks so much. And I did love visiting my grandma Meeks so much. Actually, another little anecdote from visiting her in Wadsworth, Ohio. I really got exposed to Silver Age Superman comics while visiting her, because while we were there, she let us get a library card at her library. And I got something. It's a book I have the new edition of now, but it's called the Superman Encyclopedia, which has an encyclopedia entry for every character, place, major storyline, et cetera, from the Silver Age Superman comics. Really great resource. Really fun just to sit there and flip through, and then you can go to, DC All Access or whatever and look up the issue and read it if you want to. But great conversation with Brian. We touched on religion a little bit, which I try not to do in public too much, but I thought it turned out really well. Last but not least, I have here, this person has been one of my greatest friends, creative collaborators, podcasting collaborators for the past almost 10 years now. Rebecca Johnson, host of Supergirl Radio. Now, Rebecca moved back to her hometown, Birmingham, a few years ago. So she has at least one or two perspectives on everything with an accompanying anecdote throughout the episode. Like in this clip about the classic historical Alabama theater. You mentioned that you really like the Alabama theater. I was doing some research on it. Looks like it was built in 1927 by Paramount Studios. It's still in operation today as a movie theater and entertainment venue.
Correct. Yes.
Well, since you told me you wanted to talk about it, let's talk. Why don't we start here? Tell me about the first time you went there.
The first time I remember being there, which may not be the first time I went there, but I was probably a sophomore in high school. I remember that my friend Cheryl had called me up saying, hey, would you want to go down to the Alabama Theater and watch Gone with the Wind with her then boyfriend, Matt, and her? And I was so young that I didn't realize what I had been roped into. This was basically just a way so that the parents didn't think anything was going on with the two of them. I was kind of the shield, and I didn't realize I was being used at the time. But I was like, sure, I'll go down and see a movie. I take that back. That might have been 8th grade. It might have been middle school.
I've totally been in that position. I get invited to my sister's boyfriend's house to play video games, and it turns out it's really just so they can see each other, and I'm the chaperone, but not really.
Yeah. I was extremely used that day, but that was the first time I saw Gone with the Wind, and it was the full deal with the intermission and everything. And we sat up in the balcony because, of course, with Cheryl and her boyfriend. I will not name names, but I probably should have changed her name to protect the innocent. But it's already happened. Cheryl's been called out. But we sat up in the balcony, and it's just such a beautiful place inside. They did a lot of renovation to it, and it's just I think it's like a wonderfully preserved place inside. And I have a soft spot for old movie theaters. I just love them. I wish I could go to more of them. I would make a documentary about them. I love them.
The grandeur and the velvet curtains and
that Jim Carrey movie called The Majestic. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing.
That is an unsung classic.
Yes.
Like minus the 30 seconds where Jim Carrey's crying and he looks like The Mask. Like, I mean, it's a perfect movie.
If I could have people sometimes ask me, what's your dream job? And I'll be like, well, I wish I was Tina Fey, or I could be a head writer on a soap opera. That's all a lie. I wish that I could own and operate an old movie theater. That would be actually the dream, because that would be so fun. But I remember having despite being used by my friends, I had a really good experience there, and I enjoyed. It was a different thing. It wasn't just going to the regular movie theater. It was some different place, and it had a different feel to it. It made you feel like you were in the past, and so that was my first experience. And they do a lot of summer movies like that. So that would have been a summer movie, Gone with the Wind, which is 4 hours long. So it's a time commitment.
It came on like 4 VHS tapes back in the day. It's a monster.
It's a crazy long movie, but the summer movies, they'll do movies in the summer and then they do movies during Christmas. So I like especially try to go to the ones during Christmas. I saw Christmas Vacation there last year. And so that's a really fun time. They decorate the theater and, Christmas decorations. And I also recently saw a concert there. So they do concerts, they do plays. I saw a play when I was in high school there. I should add there is an organ there.
Ooh.
There is a pipe organ at the Alabama Theater. I think I looked it up. It's a Wurlitzer Opus 1783. So it's a pipe organ that comes out of the floor and it pops up. And so they use it to do sing-alongs during Christmas time for Christmas carols. And I'm in a couple of days, I'm actually going to go see the Phantom of the Opera silent film there. At the Alabama Theater. And so I imagine the pipe organ may be used for that as well to fill in the music for the. I've never seen a silent film in the proper silent film format. So I'm excited to see that. So they do so many really unique and fun things that you wouldn't be able to get there. So I really love the Alabama Theater so much.
And probably partially it's set up to do all that stuff because, like I said in my research, Paramount funded it back in the day. So back, before the talkies and stuff, the way they would distribute films is they would send out a film canister and they'd send out sheet music, and you'd always have a live performer sitting there performing the ding 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 as Charlie Chaplin was chasing a horse down the road.
Well, they've had to do a lot of fundraising, and they have people who are in Birmingham. They have a lot of people who are very passionate about the Alabama Theater, and I was a member of the Alabama Theater. So I think that there are a lot of people who don't want it to die. It's a landmark in Birmingham. And so everybody really wants to make sure it's taken care of so it can keep going.
Being a young artist in Birmingham, did you ever have an opportunity to actually perform there? Because I know you've done music and stuff.
Yeah, I was in the band, so I played bassoon and clarinet, but we never performed there. I have some friends who have performed there. The only time I ever did anything artsy was that I shot and edited a video for a friend of mine who wanted to propose to his girlfriend in a very special way. So his plan was that he was going to make this music video with a song that he wrote and performed. And then I was going to help him make this music video to be played at the Alabama Theater. So I actually had something screened at the Alabama Theater. I may not have played my bassoon there.
Have I told you you were amazing? And how I can't wait to see you again. Have I told you how beautiful you are? And how long I've been waiting for true love to begin.
So he played the video over the screen there. And then after it was over, he proposed to his girlfriend. So all of his friends and family were there. And so it was kind of a cool thing. So I actually had a video of mine that I shot and edited, screened at the Alabama Theater, and there was an audience there to watch it. So that's actually pretty cool.
I could seriously talk to Rebecca Johnson for about 17 hours and still have plenty left to talk about. Thanks so much to Rebecca, Brian, Kelly, and all the other guests I've had on season 1 of Where I'm From. It's been a great experience. I've been really enjoying getting back into weekly or semi-weekly podcasting. And I'm really excited about all the new things I'm planning for season 2, which starts in the new year. Plenty of fun, new, innovative interviews coming your way. And I'm probably going to be playing a bit more with the AI stuff too, because that's a lot of fun. But if you like the show, please consider going to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get a podcast and leaving us an honest review to help get the word out about the show. You can also hit that like button on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you happen to be watching it. You'll find links to all the places where you can watch it over at billmeeks.com/where I'm from, all one word. Or just go to billmeeks.com. It's right there on the front page. Now, if you want to talk to me about where you're from, or you have any reactions to any of the guests I had on throughout the course of season 1, feel free to shoot me an email, bill@billmeeks.com. As for the show, when we go live over at youtube.com/@BillMeeksLA, and then publish the episode after editing a couple weeks later at youtube.com/@WhereI'mFromPodcast, or just search Where I'm From Podcast on iTunes, or on YouTube rather, or iTunes, wherever you find your podcast or YouTube videos. Now, I think that does it for this sampler platter. I hope you're full. I hope you don't have to buy any items here at the Costco because you're so full of wonderful samples from the first season of Where I'm From. Join us next time when I talk to somebody else about where they're from. See you soon.